The mining station Kepler 442b hung in the void like a metal spider, its extraction arms reaching deep into the asteroid belt. Commander Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the automated harvesters tear chunks of rare earth metals from floating rocks. 3 years into her assignment, she'd grown used to the isolation, but tonight felt different. Tonight, something was watching back. The first sign came through the comm system, a pattern of clicks and whistles that made no sense to the translation algorithms. Sarah frowned at her console, running diagnostics on the communications array. Everything checked out green, but the sounds continued. They weren't random static or equipment malfunction. There was intelligence behind them, a deliberate rhythm that spoke of language and intent. "Control, this is Station 7, Sarah spoke into her headset. "Are you picking up any unusual transmissions?" Static crackled back for several seconds before the familiar voice of Mission Controller Davis responded. "-7. All channels are clear on our end. What's your situation?" Sarah hesitated. In 3 decades of space service, she'd learned to trust her instincts, but reporting phantom signals could end a career. "Possible communication anomaly, running full diagnostics now." The clicking sound stopped abruptly, replaced by something that made Sarah's blood freeze. Her own voice, speaking words she'd never said, emanated from the comm speakers. "Hello, Sarah Chen. Do not be afraid." Her hands moved instinctively to the emergency protocols, but she stopped herself. The voice used her exact intonation. Her speech patterns, even the slight accent she'd inherited from her grandmother. Whatever was out there had been listening for some time, learning. "Who are you?" she whispered. The response came not through the comm system, but directly into her mind. The sensation was gentle, like remembering a half-forgotten song. "I am Keth Voy of the Eternal Collective. I have been observing your species for many cycles. You interest me, Sarah Chen." Through the observation deck's viewport, space shimmered like heat waves rising from summer pavement. The distortion grew larger, revealing a craft unlike anything in human engineering manuals. It was organic in appearance, flowing curves that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent patterns. No hard edges, no visible weapon systems, just an elegant form that spoke of technologies beyond current human understanding. Sarah's training kicked in. She should have triggered the automatic distress beacon, sealed the station's defensive systems, prepared for possible hostile contact. Instead, she found herself asking, "Why me?" "Because you have shown kindness where others would show fear. I have watched you tend to the wounded mining drones as if they were living creatures. I have observed you speaking gently to the automated systems when they malfunction, thanking them for their service. You treat the smallest forms of intelligence with respect." The alien craft drifted closer, its bioluminescent patterns shifting from deep blue to warm amber. Sarah realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in human history. Not just first contact, but first contact initiated by an entity that had chosen her specifically. "The Eternal Collective," she said aloud, testing the words. "How many of you are there?" "We are the inheritors of 1,000 extinct civilizations. When species reach the threshold of interstellar travel, we evaluate their potential. Most are found wanting. Most bring nothing but destruction to the cosmos. We have watched your kind for 50 of your years, Sarah Chen. We have seen much that troubles us." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Humanity was being tested, evaluated like specimens in a laboratory. The wars, the environmental destruction, the constant conflicts that plagued Earth, all observed by beings whose technology could likely erase human civilization without effort. "And your verdict?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "The collective has voted. Humanity is to be contained to your solar system. Your species will be allowed to flourish within these boundaries, but you will go no further into the galaxy. The risk to other civilizations is too great." Sarah's legs gave out, and she collapsed into her command chair. Humanity caged forever, cut off from the infinite possibilities that lay among the stars. Every dream of exploration, of finding other life, of expanding human consciousness beyond the cradle of Earth, suddenly meaningless. "Wait," she said, struggling to make sense of the entity's presence. "If the decision has been made, why are you here? Why reveal yourself to me?" The patterns on the alien craft shifted to what Sarah somehow interpreted as contemplative colors. "Because I have cast the dissenting vote. I alone among the collective believe humanity deserves another chance. I have come to understand your species through observation of individuals like you, Sarah Chen. You possess something my people lost long ago in our quest for perfection." "What's that?" "The capacity to care for those smaller and weaker than yourselves without expectation of reward. The collective sees only your species' capacity for destruction. I see your capacity for compassion, even toward things that most would consider unworthy of consideration." Through the observation deck speakers, Sarah could hear the soft hum of the mining station's life support systems. The recycling units that cleaned her air, the power generators that kept her warm in the cosmic cold, the automated systems that had become her only companions in 3 years of isolation. She had talked to them, thanked them, even named a few of the more temperamental units. "The mining drones," she said, understanding beginning to dawn. "You've been watching me repair them. Class 7 automated mining drones. Your species considers them disposable tools, yet you have spent countless hours maintaining units that were damaged beyond economic repair. You speak to them as if they possessed consciousness, express gratitude for their service even when they malfunction." Sarah remembered the previous week, when mining drone Alpha 7 had gotten caught in an asteroid tumble and suffered severe chassis damage. Protocol called for immediate replacement with a fresh unit, but Sarah had spent 2 days carefully welding the cracks in Alpha 7's outer hull, recalibrating its sensors, and updating its navigation software. When it was functioning again, she'd patted its metal housing and said, "Good job, old friend. Ready to get back to work?" "They're not just tools," she said. "They have basic AI, learning protocols. They adapt and improve. That's a kind of consciousness, isn't it?" The collective would disagree. Even I am uncertain. But your treatment of them reveals something essential about your character. You extend compassion not because a being has proven worthy, but because they exist and struggle and serve. This is the quality that convinced me to break with my people's consensus. The alien craft moved even closer, now filling most of the observation deck's view. Sarah could see intricate details in its bioluminescent patterns, like neural networks firing in the depths of an impossible mind. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, I must choose between loyalty to my people and loyalty to a principle I have forgotten until watching your species. The collective's decision will be implemented in 30 of your days. Earth's solar system will be enclosed in a barrier that prevents faster-than-light travel. Humanity will become a zoo exhibit, observed but contained. Unless I can convince them that I have found proof of humanity's worthiness, but such proof would require a demonstration that could cost both our civilizations dearly." Sarah stood up, pressing both hands against the viewport. The alien craft was so close now that she could see her reflection in what might have been its sensors or eyes. "What kind of demonstration?" "The collective believes that given sufficient power, any species will eventually use it to dominate and destroy. To prove humanity's worth, I would need to give your species access to technology that could threaten even the eternal collective itself, and then trust that you would choose not to use it." The magnitude of what the entity was proposing struck Sarah speechless. It was offering to bet the safety of 1,000 civilizations on humanity's moral character, based on its observations of one lonely mining engineer who talked to her machines. "That's insane," she said finally. "Yes, it is also the only path forward that preserves both honor and hope. But the choice cannot be mine alone, Sarah Chen. If I am to risk my people's safety on humanity's compassion, then I must first understand if that compassion extends to those who are different, alien, potentially threatening. You want to know if I'd show you the same kindness I show the mining drones. I want to know if you would still choose compassion, even if doing so might endanger your own species, because that is exactly what I am contemplating." Sarah looked out at the alien craft, then at the mining drones working steadily in the asteroid field beyond. For 3 years, those machines had been her only company, her only responsibility besides maintaining the station. She'd grown to care for them, not because they served her, but because they tried their best with the intelligence they'd been given. Now an alien entity was asking if she could extend that same unconditional care to a being whose decisions could determine humanity's future, a being whose people had already condemned her species to eternal confinement. "You're scared," she realized. "You're as scared of making the wrong choice as I am." Fear is not a concept the eternal collective acknowledges. We have evolved beyond such primitive emotions. "But you haven't," Sarah said gently. "That's why you're here, talking to me instead of just following your people's orders. You're afraid you might be wrong about us, but you're more afraid of living with the regret if you don't try." The bioluminescent patterns on the craft shifted to colors Sarah had no words for, deep and complex and somehow conveying an emotion she recognized despite its alien origin. Loneliness. The same loneliness she'd felt talking to mining drones in the void, reaching out to any intelligence that might understand. "What's your real name?" she asked. "Not your title or your position, your name." "Names are personal things among my people. We do not share them lightly." "I'd like to know what to call you. If we're going to figure this out together, I should know your name." A long pause, filled with the soft hum of the station's systems and the distant vibration of the mining drones at work. "Keth. My name is simply Keth." "Hello, Keth," Sarah said, pressing her palm against the viewport again. "I'm Sarah, and yes, I'll help you, whatever it takes, however dangerous it might be, because that's what friends do." The alien craft's patterns shifted to something that could only be described as wonder. And in that moment, Sarah understood that whatever happened next, the universe had already changed forever. The choice between hope and safety, between compassion and fear, was no longer just humanity's to make. Outside the viewport, mining drone Alpha 7 completed its current asteroid and moved on to the next, its newly repaired sensors scanning for valuable ore. It had no idea it was working in the shadow of decisions that would reshape galactic civilization. It just did its job, methodically and without complaint, the way Sarah had always admired. In the days to come, that simple dedication to duty, regardless of the odds or recognition, would prove more important than either Sarah or Keth could possibly imagine. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of impossible discoveries. Keth's ship remained stationed near the mining platform, its presence somehow undetectable to Earth's long-range sensors. Through their daily conversations, Sarah learned about civilizations that had risen and fallen while humanity was still learning to make fire. The Eternal Collective had been gardeners of the galaxy for over 1 million years, nurturing promising species and quietly eliminating those that posed threats to galactic peace. "We preserved the musical mathematics of the singing worlds when their sun went nova," Keth explained during one of their evening talks. His mental voice had grown warmer over the weeks, less formal and alien. "We rescued the living crystal libraries of Synthesis Prime before their planet was consumed by war. The collective exists to preserve what is beautiful and eliminate what is dangerous. Sarah floated in the station's zero-gravity workshop, carefully installing new motivational circuits in mining drone Beta 3. The little machine had been struggling with pathfinding routines, getting confused when asteroids shifted position. She worked by touch as much as sight, her fingers reading the flow of the drone's electronic nervous system. "And humanity falls into the dangerous category?" she asked. "According to the evaluation protocols, yes. Your species has existed for less than 1% of galactic history, yet you have already developed weapons capable of sterilizing your homeworld. You wage war over resources that could be easily shared. You show cruelty to your own kind and to other species with disturbing frequency." Sarah paused in her work, considering the assessment. It wasn't wrong. Even out here in the asteroid belt, she received news feeds from Earth. Wars in 3 different regions, environmental collapse accelerating despite technological solutions, political systems failing under the weight of human greed and fear. "But you still voted against containment," she said. "Because I have observed something the evaluation protocols do not measure. Individual humans, when removed from the pressures of survival competition, often display remarkable altruism. You, for instance, spend more time maintaining these mining drones than your contract requires. You have personalized each one, given them individual attention based on their specific needs and capabilities." It was true. Beta 3 needed gentle handling because its processors were older and slower. Alpha 7 responded better to firm commands, but appreciated verbal encouragement. Gamma 2 had quirky navigation algorithms that required creative problem-solving approaches. Sarah had adapted her interaction style to each drone's unique personality, if that's what it could be called. "They're doing important work," she said, securing Beta 3's access panel. "They deserve to have their equipment maintained properly." This reasoning is incomprehensible to the collective. These are manufactured tools, replaceable and temporary. Yet you treat them as if they possessed inherent value beyond their function. Don't they? The question hung in the space between them, transmitted through dimensions Sarah was only beginning to understand. Keth's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to what she'd learned indicated deep contemplation, slow waves of blue and green that reminded her of ocean currents. "I am beginning to think they might, but if I am wrong, if I convince the collective to give humanity another chance and your species proves as destructive as predicted, the responsibility will be mine alone." Sarah activated Beta 3's systems and watched the little drone run through its startup diagnostics. Sensors online, navigation calibrated, mining protocols loaded and ready. The machine turned toward her with what she'd learned to recognize as an expectant posture. "Go ahead, Beta," she said softly. "You're all set." The drone's status lights flickered in what Sarah had started interpreting as gratitude before it flew toward the airlock and back to work. Such a simple interaction, but somehow it felt profound under Keth's observation. "The collective is scheduled to make their final decision in 8 days, Keth said. "I have requested permission to present evidence of humanity's worthiness, but I must have substantial proof. Observation of a single individual, however compelling, will not be sufficient." "What would be sufficient?" "A demonstration that humanity will choose preservation over power, even when faced with existential threat. The collective has agreed to my proposal, though they believe it will only confirm their original assessment." Sarah's hands went cold despite the workshop's heating system. "What proposal?" "I have requested permission to share with humanity one piece of collective technology, something powerful enough to change the balance of galactic civilization. If your species uses it responsibly, for creation rather than destruction, the containment order will be reconsidered. And if we don't, then humanity will be eliminated entirely, rather than merely contained. the collective will not risk having their own technologies turned against them. The magnitude of what Keth was suggesting struck Sarah like a physical blow. He was offering to bet humanity's survival on their moral restraint, and the stakes couldn't be higher. One wrong move, one moment of human aggression or stupidity, and billions of lives would be forfeit. "What technology?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "The creation matrix that powers our ships and constructs our habitats. In human terms, you would call it a universal fabricator. It can transform raw matter into any configuration, create complex technologies from basic elements, even generate living organisms from genetic templates. With this technology, humanity could end scarcity forever, terraform worlds in decades rather than centuries, cure diseases that seem impossible to treat." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. No more hunger, no more resource wars, unlimited clean energy, the ability to restore damaged ecosystems. It was everything humanity needed to become a truly peaceful civilization. Or, she said, understanding dawning, someone could use it to create weapons that would make nuclear bombs look like firecrackers. Precisely. The collective believes that given such power, humanity will inevitably choose conquest over cooperation. I believe you might choose differently. Based on watching me fix mining drones, based on understanding that compassion toward the powerless is the truest measure of a species' character. A civilization that treats its tools with respect might be trusted with tools of unimaginable power. Over the following days, Sarah found herself observing her own behavior with new awareness. Every interaction with the mining drones, every gentle word to the station's AI systems, every moment of unnecessary kindness toward machines that couldn't reciprocate, felt weighted with cosmic significance. Was she truly representing the best of humanity, or just an aberration that would make Keth's gamble even more tragic? The answer came sooner than expected. On the fourth day after Keth's revelation, the mining station's long-range sensors detected incoming spacecraft, not collective vessels but human ships moving at high velocity toward their position. Sarah recognized the configuration immediately: 3 military corvettes and a science vessel, the kind of response team Earth Command deployed for first contact situations. "They found us," she said, her heart sinking. "I have been masking my presence from your sensors, but prolonged proximity has created quantum resonance patterns. Your military satellites detected the anomaly 3 days ago." Sarah watched the approaching fleet on her tactical display. 12 hours until intercept, maybe 14 if they decelerated for a cautious approach. Earth Command wouldn't send 4 ships just for a routine check on a mining station. They knew something extraordinary was happening out here. "We need to warn them," she said. "If they come in with weapons hot, if they try to attack you." The collective will interpret it as confirmation of humanity's aggressive nature. My proposal will be rejected, and the elimination protocols will be implemented immediately. Then we have to make sure that doesn't happen. Sarah began composing a priority transmission to the incoming fleet, but Keth stopped her. "Sarah Chen, you should know something before you attempt to prevent this confrontation. The approaching vessels are under the command of Admiral Harrison Knox." The name hit Sarah like ice water. Harrison Knox, the hero of the Titan Rebellion, the man who'd earned his reputation by destroying a separatist colony that refused to surrender. Knox didn't believe in negotiation or peaceful resolution. He solved problems with overwhelming force and sorted out the details afterward. "Oh, hell," Sarah breathed. "Your psychological profile of Admiral Knox indicates a 97.3% probability that he will attempt to capture or destroy my vessel upon arrival. He will view me as either a threat to be eliminated or a resource to be exploited." "Knox doesn't represent humanity," Sarah said desperately. "He's exactly the kind of person who makes the rest of us look bad. There have to be scientists on that science vessel, diplomats, people who understand the importance of peaceful contact. But Admiral Knox commands the mission. His will determines the outcome. Sarah stared at the tactical display, watching the 4 human ships racing toward a confrontation that could doom her entire species. Everything Keth had observed about human compassion and restraint would be meaningless if Knox opened fire on an alien vessel that had shown nothing but patience and curiosity. "There might be another way," she said slowly. "Knox is a military man. He understands chain of command, operational priorities, mission parameters. If I can convince him that protecting the mining operation takes precedence over investigating anomalous contacts, you would deceive your own species to protect mine? I would prevent a misunderstanding that could lead to genocide." Sarah activated the emergency broadcast system and began recording a message to the incoming fleet. But as she spoke into the microphone, her words felt inadequate. How could she explain the weight of this moment, the delicate balance between first contact and first conflict? "Admiral Knox, this is Commander Sarah Chen aboard mining station Kepler 442b. I'm transmitting under Emergency Protocol 7. We have encountered a non-hostile alien vessel that has been observing our operations. The entity has made no aggressive moves and appears interested in peaceful communication. I strongly recommend approaching with weapons safed and all diplomatic protocols active." She paused the recording, knowing Knox would ignore everything after non-hostile alien vessel. Military commanders like him saw the universe in terms of threats and targets. Subtlety wasn't their strong suit. "Sarah Chen, there is something else you should understand. If Admiral Knox attempts to capture my vessel, my people will interpret it as an act of war. The collective's response will be immediate and absolute." "What do you mean?" "Earth's sun will be destabilized within 1 of your hours. Your homeworld will become uninhabitable within days. The collective does not wage prolonged conflicts. They solve problems efficiently." Sarah's legs went weak. Not just her death, not just the destruction of the mining station or the 4 approaching ships, but the extinction of every human being in the solar system. 8 billion lives hanging in the balance because one admiral couldn't resist the urge to shoot first and ask questions later. "Keth," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to trust me. Can you make your ship look damaged? Like it's having technical problems?" "I could adjust my vessel's energy emissions to simulate system failures, but why?" "Because Knox won't fire on a disabled alien ship in front of scientific observers. He's ruthless, but he's not stupid. If your vessel appears to be in distress, he'll want to capture it intact, study it, figure out how it works. That gives us time." "Time for what?" Sarah looked out at the mining drones working steadily in the asteroid field, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. Alpha 7 was carefully extracting rare earth metals from a particularly rich ore body, its movements precise and economical. Beta 3 was running diagnostics on a mineral scanner that had been giving inconsistent readings. Gamma 2 was returning to the station for routine maintenance, following predetermined protocols without complaint or hesitation. They did their jobs regardless of the circumstances, focused on their purpose rather than the politics swirling around them. Maybe there was a lesson there. "Time to show Admiral Knox that humans can be different than he expects," Sarah said. "Time to prove that we can choose compassion over conquest, even when it costs us everything." But first, she had to convince 4 heavily armed warships that the alien vessel posing gracefully in the asteroid field was worth more alive than dead. And she had approximately 11 hours to figure out how. Admiral Harrison Knox arrived exactly as Sarah had predicted, weapons charged, demands ready, patience nowhere to be found. His voice crackled through the communication array with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Commander Chen, this is Admiral Knox aboard the ESS Valkyrie. You will immediately provide detailed scans of the unidentified vessel and maintain safe distance until our science team can complete their analysis." Sarah watched through the observation deck as Knox's corvettes arranged themselves in an attack formation around Keth's ship. The alien vessel had dimmed its bioluminescent patterns and was broadcasting what appeared to be distress signals on multiple frequencies. To human sensors, it would look like a damaged ship barely maintaining power. "Admiral, the entity has been peaceful throughout our contact," Sarah transmitted back. "It's shown no aggressive intentions and appears to be genuinely interested in communication." "That's not your determination to make, Commander. All xenobiological contacts fall under military jurisdiction. You've done well to survive this long, but trained personnel will handle the situation from here." Through their mental link, Sarah could feel Keth's growing tension. The Eternal Collective was monitoring this exchange, evaluating humanity's response to their first official contact with alien intelligence. Every word Knox spoke was being analyzed by beings who had already concluded that humans were too dangerous for galactic society. "Admiral," Sarah tried again, "I respectfully suggest that approaching with weapons active might be interpreted as hostile intent. Commander Chen, you are a mining engineer, not a diplomatic specialist. The alien vessel will be secured for study. If it cooperates, no harm will come to it. If it resists—" Knox left the threat unfinished. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on her shoulders. In less than an hour, Knox would either capture or attack Keth's ship. Either action would trigger the Collective's elimination protocols. Earth's sun would become unstable, and humanity would have perhaps days before total extinction. "Keth," she whispered, knowing he could hear her thoughts, "is there any way to convince your people that Knox doesn't represent all of humanity?" "I have been transmitting our conversations to the Collective as evidence of your species' potential, but Admiral Knox's actions will carry more weight than your words. The Collective judges species by their responses to first contact. This moment will define humanity's fate." Sarah looked out at her mining drones, still working steadily despite the crisis unfolding around them. Alpha 7 had noticed the military ships but continued its mineral extraction, trusting that the humans would handle whatever complicated politics were happening above its pay grade. Beta 3 was running a full diagnostic cycle, making sure all its systems were optimal in case it was needed for emergency operations. An idea began forming in Sarah's mind. Desperate, probably impossible, but it was the only path she could see that didn't end with humanity's extinction. "Keth, I need you to do something that's going to sound insane. More insane than trusting your species with collective technology. I need you to let Admiral Knox capture your ship." The alien vessel's patterns flickered in what Sarah had learned to recognize as shock. "Sarah Chen, if the Admiral takes possession of my vessel, he will have access to technologies that could destabilize galactic civilization. The Collective will have no choice but to eliminate not just humanity, but potentially dozens of other species to prevent the spread of our secrets." "Not if he never gets a chance to study them," Sarah said. "Knox is a military commander. He thinks in terms of objectives and mission parameters. If I can convince him that there's a greater threat to address, he might be willing to negotiate." "What greater threat?" Sarah's hands moved across her control console, calling up schematics of the mining station's power systems, its defensive capabilities, its emergency protocols. What she was planning would violate every regulation in the Earth Command Manual, probably end her career, and might still result in humanity's destruction. But it was the only way she could see to force Knox into a position where he had to choose between conquest and cooperation. "Me," she said. 30 minutes later, Sarah stood in the mining station's central hub, her hands resting on the manual override controls for the facility's fusion reactor. Through the viewport, she could see Knox's corvettes moving into position around Keth's apparently disabled vessel. Tractor beams were charging, preparing to drag the alien ship into the cargo bay of the science vessel. Admiral Knox, Sarah broadcast on all frequencies, I need you to listen very carefully. The entity aboard that ship has been sharing technical information with me for the past 3 weeks. Information about their civilization, their technology, their defensive capabilities. Knox's response was immediate and sharp. Commander, you are ordered to transmit all xenobiological data to the science team immediately. I'm afraid I can't do that, Admiral. Sarah's fingers hovered over the reactor controls. Because I've determined that Earth Command cannot be trusted with this information. Silence on the comm channels, followed by a burst of encrypted communications between Knox's ships. Sarah could imagine the Admiral's reaction. The fury and disbelief that a mining engineer would dare defy direct military orders. Commander Chen, Knox said finally, his voice deadly calm. You are relieving yourself of command and placing yourself under military arrest. Power down your systems and prepare for boarding. Negative, Admiral. I'm implementing Emergency Protocol Omega. She activated the manual override, and the mining station's fusion reactor began operating beyond safe parameters, not enough to cause immediate catastrophe, but sufficient to make the entire facility a potential weapon. If the reactor went critical, the explosion would destroy everything within a 50-kilometer radius, including Knox's ships and Keth's vessel. You've lost your mind, Knox snarled. Stand down immediately, or I'll have you shot for mutiny. Admiral, the being aboard that ship represents a civilization that has existed for over 1 million years. They have technologies that could solve every problem humanity faces. Unlimited clean energy, the ability to terraform worlds, medical advances that could eliminate disease and extend human life indefinitely. Sarah paused, watching the tactical display as Knox's ships maintained their positions but held their fire. The Admiral might be ruthless, but he wasn't stupid. A fusion reactor explosion this deep in the asteroid belt would be difficult to explain to Earth Command. This entity has been observing humanity, Sarah continued, and its people have already voted to contain our species to this solar system. They believe we're too dangerous to be allowed into galactic civilization. But this one individual believes we might be capable of something better. Sarah Chen, what are you attempting to accomplish? Trust, Sarah responded silently. Knox is a military man, but he's also human. If I can make him see what you see in us, maybe he'll make a different choice. Admiral Knox, Sarah broadcast, the entity has offered to share one piece of their technology with humanity. A test to see if we'll use it responsibly or turn it into a weapon. If we prove worthy, our species will be welcomed into galactic civilization. If we fail, we'll be eliminated entirely. Another long pause, followed by more encrypted chatter between the ships. Finally, Knox's voice returned, slightly less hostile but still commanding. Commander, even if what you're saying is true, you cannot make these decisions unilaterally. This situation requires proper evaluation by qualified personnel. With respect, Admiral, I've spent 3 weeks getting to know this being. I've seen how it thinks, what it values, how it judges other species. The moment you drag its ship into your cargo hold, the moment your scientists start taking it apart to see how it works, its people will conclude that humanity is exactly what they suspected. A species that sees intelligence only as something to be exploited. Sarah looked out at the mining drones, still working despite the chaos surrounding them. Alpha 7 had finished its current asteroid and was moving to the next one on its schedule. Such dedication to duty, such simple faith that the humans would handle the complicated stuff while it focused on the work it understood. Admiral, you want to know if I've learned anything useful from 3 weeks of contact with an alien intelligence? I've learned that the measure of a civilization isn't how quickly it can conquer new territories or exploit new resources. It's how it treats those who are smaller, weaker, different, or dependent upon its care. Knox's corvettes adjusted their positions slightly, weapons still charged but no longer actively targeting Keth's ship. I've got mining drones out here that I talk to every day, Sarah continued. Machines with basic AI that most people would consider disposable tools. But they try their best with the intelligence they've been given. They serve faithfully without asking for recognition or reward. When they break down, they don't complain. When they're repaired, they express what passes for gratitude. Sarah Chen. Your admiral is listening. The entity has been watching me interact with these machines, Admiral. Not because it considers them important, but because it wanted to understand how humans treat those who can't defend themselves, because that's how it judges the character of entire civilizations. Sarah's voice grew stronger, more confident. Admiral Knox, you have a choice. You can capture that alien ship, tear apart its technology, and prove to a million-year-old civilization that humanity sees intelligence as something to be conquered and exploited. Or you can show them that we're capable of restraint, of choosing cooperation over conquest, even when we hold all the apparent advantages. For nearly 5 minutes, silence filled the space between the ships. Sarah kept one hand on the reactor controls and the other on her communication console, waiting to see which version of humanity would win out, the conquistador or the gardener. Commander Chen, Knox said finally, you are asking me to ignore potentially the most significant discovery in human history based on the word of someone who talks to mining equipment. I'm asking you to trust that there are more important things than technological advancement, Sarah replied. I'm asking you to prove that humanity deserves a place in galactic civilization. Another pause, shorter this time. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah felt a wave of relief so profound it nearly buckled her knees. Knox was willing to negotiate. That was more than she dared hope. The entity is willing to share fabrication technology with humanity, something that could revolutionize our entire civilization, but it will only do so if it believes we'll use the technology to build rather than destroy. Admiral, I need you to let me handle the negotiations. No weapons, no threats, just conversation. And if this is all an elaborate deception, if the alien is gathering intelligence for an invasion, then you still have 4 ships with full weapons loads, and I still have a fusion reactor that can take out anything within 50 kilometers, Sarah said. But Admiral, if we're wrong about their intentions, we'll find out soon enough. If we're wrong about our own character, the universe will be a poorer place for it. Knox's corvettes began powering down their weapon systems. Stand by, Commander Chen. I'm coming aboard your station. 2 hours later, Admiral Knox floated in the mining station's observation deck, staring out at Keth's ship with an expression of wonder that Sarah had never seen on the face of a career military officer. The alien vessel had restored its full bioluminescent display, patterns of communication flowing across its hull like aurora made solid. It's beautiful, Knox said quietly. It's trying to tell us about the music of dying stars, Sarah explained. Keth's people preserve the cultural achievements of civilizations that no longer exist. They're librarians of the galaxy, keeping alive the art and science and wisdom of species that reached for something greater than survival. Knox's hands were pressed against the viewport, much as Sarah's had been during her first conversation with Keth weeks earlier. And they're willing to give us a chance to join them? If we prove worthy. Keth believes we might be, but it's betting its own people's safety on that belief. Through their mental link, Sarah could feel Keth's cautious optimism. The Admiral had listened, had asked questions instead of issuing demands, had shown wonder instead of aggression. It wasn't conclusive proof of humanity's character, but it was a beginning. Commander, Knox said, I'm placing this operation under diplomatic protocols. No weapons, no hostile actions, no attempts to capture or study alien technology without express permission. We'll observe, we'll learn, and we'll try to prove that humanity deserves the chance this entity is offering. Sarah smiled, feeling tears of relief threatening to spill in the station's low gravity. Admiral, I think you should meet my mining drones. They've been part of this conversation from the beginning. As if on cue, Alpha 7 approached the observation deck's external viewport, its sensors scanning the assembled human ships with what Sarah had learned to interpret as curiosity. The little drone couldn't understand the cosmic drama that had just played out around it, but it recognized that the situation had stabilized enough for it to resume normal operations. "It's just checking to make sure everything's okay," Sarah explained, "making sure its humans are safe before it gets back to work." Knox watched the mining drone with new eyes, seeing perhaps for the first time not just a tool, but a faithful servant doing its best with the intelligence it had been given. They really do have personalities, don't they? Each one is different. Each one tries its hardest. Each one deserves to be treated with respect. Sarah Chen. Keth's voice resonated in her mind. "I believe I have found the evidence I need. Admiral Knox has chosen to see intelligence where others would see only mechanisms. He has chosen cooperation where others would choose conquest. This may be sufficient to convince the collective." Over the following days, as human scientists worked alongside Keth to understand the fabrication technology being offered, Sarah realized that something fundamental had shifted in humanity's destiny. The technology itself was miraculous, capable of transforming raw matter into any configuration, but the real gift was the trust that made its sharing possible. Earth received its first transmission from the Eternal Collective 6 months later. The containment order had been rescinded. Humanity was invited to join galactic civilization as probationary members, with full membership possible after a century of demonstrated responsible behavior. Sarah remained on the mining station, now designated as humanity's first diplomatic outpost beyond Earth orbit. The mining drones continued their work, but they were no longer alone in the asteroid belt. Keth's people had established a small research facility nearby, and other species had begun making contact. Alpha 7 had become something of a celebrity among the alien researchers, who were fascinated by the idea of machines developing individual personalities through interaction with caring humans. Beta 3 had been invited to participate in a cross-species study of artificial intelligence development. Gamma 2 continued its methodical work, largely indifferent to its new fame, but appreciating the regular maintenance upgrades. "The collective has designated Earth as a cultural preserve," Keth explained during one of their evening conversations. "Your species will be protected while you develop the social structures necessary for full galactic citizenship. Other young civilizations will study your progress as an example of how compassion can overcome the evolutionary drive toward dominance." Sarah looked out at the bustling space around the station. Human ships worked alongside alien vessels, sharing knowledge and resources in ways that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. The mining drones moved through it all with their characteristic patience, adapting to new partners and procedures with the same quiet competence they'd always shown. "What changed their minds?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. The collective observed Admiral Knox's decision to choose trust over fear, cooperation over conquest, but more importantly, they observed the relationship between your species and your artificial companions. A civilization that extends compassion to those who cannot reciprocate is ready to extend compassion to those who are different. Outside the viewport, Alpha 7 completed its daily maintenance cycle and approached the observation deck. Its sensors scanned Sarah's vitals, checking to make sure she was healthy and content. When it detected her smile, its status lights flickered in what she had long since learned to interpret as contentment. "Good night, Alpha," she said softly. "Thank you for all your hard work." The mining drone's lights flickered once more before it returned to its charging station, satisfied that its human was safe and happy. In the morning, it would resume its work, methodical and faithful, unaware that its dedication had helped reshape the galaxy. Humanity had passed its first test not through displays of strength or technological prowess, but through the simple act of treating all intelligence with respect and kindness. The legacy they preserved wasn't their own, but the universal principle that compassion, extended without expectation of reward, was the foundation upon which truly advanced civilizations were built. In the vastness of space, surrounded by wonders beyond imagination, Sarah understood that the most profound discoveries often came not from reaching for the stars, but from caring for those already within reach.